So today I want to talk about highway signs because it's been something that's been plaguing my mind recently for some reason. And the specific question that I had was, okay, so you have this highway sign. How big is this letter in terms of points? Often say, 12 points, 12-point fonts, or 10-point font, or 14-point fonts. Okay, so what does this point even mean in the first place? And how do we understand it? Let's talk about this. Here's what I know from the minimal amounts of research that I have done so far in this topic. The thing that I know is that a point that we talk about in like 12-point font. A point refers to 1/72nd of an inch. I'll get to why this is more complicated in a little bit, but let's just start out with the simple idea that point refers to a 72nd of an inch. Now, when people usually do like lectures or whatever, what they do is they have a 14-point font with about 1.5 or 2 spacing, and then they use that to write a document, and on that document is what they read out for their lecture or whatever, what was speech. So we have that to go off of 14 points. And if we think about the distance that this paper usually is from your eyes, that would be about, I would say, like 3 feet away from your eyes, maybe even more, maybe around 3 to 4 feet. So let's be generous. Let's say it's 4 feet. And then it would be 4 feet. 14 points is something that you can read comfortably. Now, let's talk about highways. When we go on a highway and you're driving a car, you're usually going to be driving at around 60 to 70 miles per hour. For the sake of making things much more easier for our calculations, let's just call it 60 miles per hour because 60 miles per hour is 1 mile per minute, which is great. For our calculations, that means that you're traveling a 60th of a mile per second. And since we know that a mile is 5,280 feet, 5,280 divided by 60 is this even divisible by 3? It is. So this would be 88 feet per second. That's not frames per second, it's feet per second. So if you're traveling 88 feet per second and you want to be reading something far away on a highway sign comfortably, you would want to travel not too far, right? You would maybe want to read that from about 10 seconds away so you have enough time to read, maybe even 5 seconds. Let's be generous and say 10 seconds. So you would want to be around 880 feet away. 880 feet away, and you want to read at about a 14-point font size. So if we use the triangle similarity here, I'm just guessing that the way you see things far away is probably going to be like you want that size to be proportional as it gets further away. So 880 feet, and we said 4 feet, I think, right? And 14 points, which means 14-point font, which means that to be reading at a comfortable time and a comfortable size, you would want this to be multiplied by 220, which gets you 2,200 plus 880, which would be 3,080 point font. So is that the answer? Well, this is where things gets a little complicated. So we said that 14-point font is, or a point is a 72nd of an inch. And that's fine, that's great, but I did a little bit of a digging, and it seems that for some states, the smallest size of a letter should be 6 inches, which is great because then we can just use this to calculate exactly what the point font should be. Um, then you get something where you want to multiply 6 by 72, and then you end up with 432 point font. But wait a minute. We have 3080 here, and we have 432 here. What is going on? So 3080 versus 432, that's a pretty big difference. Why is it so different? Well, maybe there's a wrong assumption here. Maybe instead of it being 10 seconds away, maybe we only need 5 seconds to read what's on the highway sign. So that would reduce this to 440, but that would only decrease this to 1540 points, and that's still far away from our 432 points, which is not great. So let's be generous. Let's say we have reduced this to 1540. We are still more than 1,000 points off. Why the disagreement? And why does it even matter for, trying to figure this out correctly? Well, imagine a case where you want to have like a theatrical production of something and you require highway signs, real life-size highway signs for some reason. Instead of going for the larger number, you might want to go for the smaller number that is more representative of real highway signs, because larger the number, more materials would go into that production. Okay, well, that's a bit troubling. And I was looking into it further, and it turns out this concept of points is actually a lot more complicated than I thought. You see, when we have a 12-point font and you use certain fonts like Times New Roman, you'll find that you will get a slightly different size of letters than, say, if you're using Arial. And the reason for this difference is because the point here is not referring to the size of the letters, because obviously in a font, the letters have different sizes. The points refer to a box around these letters called an M. And this is kind of an antiquated way of measuring sizes of fonts, because this used to be apparently the size or the width of the letter M with kind of like spacing underneath it, and it just gets very complicated. So obviously, when you have different fonts, you're going to have different sizes of the letters, which is why I think a lot of teachers ask students to use a specific font when they're asking for 12 or 14 or 10-point font in their essays, because different fonts will give you different sizes of letters and different spacings between the letters as well. This is all like nuanced typography stuff that I just did not know about. And yet we use Times Arial, we use Calibri, we use Helvetica. Like, these are fonts that people use all the time, but we never think about like these point systems and like what that actually means, because, well, things are very complicated, and this is a rabbit hole that most people just don't bother to look into because it doesn't matter. But of course it matters. If you are creating a program that works with design, you would want to know the exact dimensions of different fonts, because your whole design might just hinge on knowing what those dimensions are. So what have we learned here today? I don't actually know. I don't actually have a concrete answer for you. In fact, I would love to know if any one of you do know the answer to this question or is able to find out, because what I learned is that there are two highway fonts. There's Highway Gothic and there is Clearview. And even amongst these fonts, there are a variety of different subtypes of these fonts. And not all states use the same font. And things are going to get even more complicated if we start adding different languages to it. And different states have different regulations about what the minimum size of a letter should be on a highway sign. And not only that, the way the M is defined and how you get to the actual size of the letters is not entirely clear to me. There's some kind of disconnect here where you can't just go by the point size to this actual size of the letters. So who knows? Who knows what the actual answer is? Because I'm sure the answer is going to be different between these two fonts, and I'm sure it's going to be different between the different states, and I'm sure it's going to be different between the different sub. Okay, that might not have been a valid crash out, but that said, there just seems to be a lot more complex things at work here, and I even wonder if there's actually a standard here. And I'm sure in, real life applications of actually creating the highway signs, people don't actually think in the font sizes. They just deal with actual sizes of the letters themselves or the heights of the letters themselves. And if it is greater than, say, 6 inches, then they're just fine. I don't know. Yeah, so that was my little rant on highway font sizes. I don't know what I learned from this experience, and you probably don't either. That said, I think it's kind of interesting to think about these little things where we just don't think about them, but encounter in everyday lives. And, in the end, we didn't get to an answer, and that's fine. That's life, I think. But maybe, it's worthwhile to think about these sometimes and like why things are the way they are. And can we connect two things that are completely familiar to us, but have not thought of the connections before? Like, who thinks about point sizes for highway signs? We encounter highway signs every day. We can encounter point sizes maybe frequently, but to connect the two is not an easy thing. But I think this kind of flexibility may help with memory. And I'll talk about that more in future videos about my theory about how memory works and how to keep a robust memory. And with that, bye bye.